Jack Benny made the most famous radio vault in history in 1945. It was all fake, just sound effects and quips about being cheap. But Jack also possessed a real vault. One that kept locked for 50 years after he died. There were audio reels inside that said, "Do not open." When the researchers finally played them, they heard Jack's voice admitting things that may have ruined his career. The recordings show the real reason he left vaudeville and what truly transpired during those years of war that are absent. His mother had already decided on the name Benjamin Kubilski months before he was born on February 14, 1894. Emma Saxes was pregnant in Waukegan, but she went all the way to Chicago to have her baby. She thought that getting her son a birth certificate from a big city would help him become a world-class violinist. She didn't want her son to be from a little town. She wanted him to be a big deal. She was weak physically, but her mind was brilliant. She had already decided that her son would play the violin in front of full concert halls when he grew up. Meyer's father had a different kind of narrative about music. He was from Poland and started out by selling things on the streets of Chicago. He worked his way up till he opened a bar. He didn't think much of show business and thought it was a bad decision for any good Jewish family. But Emma's voice was louder in that marriage. She was shaping Benjamin from the time he could grasp an instrument. They had moved back to Waukegan by the time he was 3 and settled in a small house on South G Street. Benjamin could see Lake Michigan from their front window, which was an issue. He was meant to practice his music on the violin for 2 hours every day, but he kept looking out at the lake instead. Meyer kept his tavern running and later opened a haberdashery. Emma kept playing music. Benjamin became a protective big brother when Florence was born in 1900, yet he still played the violin all day. He acquired a half-size violin as a gift on his 6th birthday that year. Professor Harlow started teaching him right away, charging 50 cents for music lessons twice a week. Benjamin was a good person. People thought he was so good that they called him a prodigy. He went to Chicago a lot to study music with Hugo Kortschak at the music college. But he didn't like to practice. His mother sat at the piano and played along with him, saying, "You can do it better," over and over again as he hardly moved his bow. The inhabitants of Waukegan trusted in him so strongly that they gave him money to go to Europe to study. Everyone was startled when he turned down the offer. He was already losing his way on that journey. He was failing all of his classes at school. He played tricks on music. He didn't go to class. The most famous one happened in the winter when he put Limber cheese behind the radiator in the classroom. The whole school had to close down when it melted. The principal assured him he could come back if he changed, but he never did. He was sent out during his first year. At that point, Benjamin had already gotten a position playing violin in the Barrison Theater's pit orchestra. He was playing live gigs while his classmates were studying arithmetic. His father's tavern was where he really learned. There were a lot of loud people and performers who traveled there. He learned what made people laugh and what didn't there. In 1911, the Marx Brothers visited to town one night, and their mother, Minnie, witnessed Benjamin play. She offered him $7.50 a week plus room and board to go on tour with them, but his parents said no. They told him it would ruin him. That could have altered his life, but they shut the door on him. Benjamin, who was 17 at the time, made a huge choice that year. He quit school for good and joined a vaudeville act with Cora Salisbury, a 43-year-old widow. She told his parents that she would keep him safe from evil influences and girls at the stage door. They traveled all the time, putting on 4 concerts a day in dusty venues all throughout the Midwest. Their act ranged from grand opera to ragtime, and Benjamin made $7.50 a week. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Then, in 1912, almost everything fell apart. Jen Kubelik, a famous violinist, got lawyers to threaten to sue him since their names are so similar. Benjamin was so scared that he changed his stage name to Ben K. Benny. But that didn't help. Ben Burney, another performer, came after him a few years later. The moniker Jack Benny comes from sailors calling each other Jack and from a lucky supper with comedian Benny Rubin. The name stuck by 1921. When Ka quit the act in 1914 to take care of her mother, Jack joined forces with pianist Lyman Woods. By 1916, their performance was making $350 to $400 a week, which was a lot of money at the time. They played at classy theaters all around the country, from Boston to San Francisco, mixing serious music with ridiculous expressions and hilarious timing. But things went wrong in 1917 when they played at the Palace Theater in New York. They bombed on the grandest vaudeville stage. The crowd didn't care that their act was based on animals. The collaboration terminated, and Jack joined the Navy. Jack was 23 when he was recruited into World War I and sent to the Great Lakes Naval Training Center. At first, he played the violin for ceremonies and events, but one night changed everything. He played the rosary during a talent event, and the audience started to boo. A fellow sailor named Pat O'Brien yelled at him to deliver a joke. Jack said something funny, and the whole place burst into laughing. That was the time. It was then that the comedian came into the world. He started doing regular shows in the Great Lakes Review, where he played a clumsy character named Izzy. He played for groups of up to 5,000 sailors. He found the right time. He found charm in music. He also found out that one joke may bring him more applause than an hour of music. He kept such character after the war ended in 1918. America was fatigued, out of money, and still had to deal with food rations. So, Jack Benny acted like the cheap, stingy person he had been in the Navy. He developed a solo act called Fiddle Phonology, which was a mix of playing the violin and making fun of being cheap. He made fun of himself. He took out false money from his coat. People adored it. The timing was perfect. People laughed because they could connect to it. He wasn't making fun of them. He was one among them. He went back to the VA circuit with Lyman Woods and made even more money playing music. They changed their act by adding music to their stand-up and scheduling second build spots all across the country. They performed in major cities including Chicago's best venues. But the big event, the Palace in New York, had already been and gone, and he couldn't get over that failure. Jack kept going, though. He cut the violin down. He made the jokes funnier. And with a name that was finally his, he slowly changed into something else. Not a failed artist or a side act, but a man who could stand in front of thousands, barely move his face, say one line of music, and leave everyone in stitches. Jack Benny was 30 years old and had been on the road for more than 10 years by the time he got to Broadway in 1924. He had been on stage before, but this was different. Benny's Follies wasn't just another vaudeville show. He finally had a chance to try something different. He held his violin and stood under the bright lights. This time, though, he wasn't attempting to show off how good he was. He purposely performed a bit badly, just enough to make others laugh, even though he had been playing music since he was 6 years old and could really play well. Broadway hadn't seen that mix of caustic sarcasm, a little song, and a lot of confidence before. The New York Times said it was new. He had been going by names like Benjamin Kobilski and Ben K. Benny for years, but he finally chose Jack Benny. It worked and it stayed. In 1926, 2 years later, he took a chance on a performance called The Great Temptations. It was daring, edgy, and even a touch scandalous. He played a violinist who made jokes again, but this time he started music ad-libbing. Sketches that were scheduled to last 5 minutes ended up lasting 15. People adored it. But producers didn't. They implored him to stick to the script so the show would stay on schedule, but Benny didn't care. He had creative power over his work because of his contract, and he used it. The fights behind the scenes were so severe that the corporation said they would fire him. But he kept going. He wasn't able to. And maybe that's when Broadway began to see that Jack Benny wasn't like the other music stars. He wasn't simply acting. He was changing the rules. That year, something unexpected happened in music. Jack met Sadie Marks. In a way, it wasn't their first meeting. Zippo Marks invited Jack to a family Passover dinner in Vancouver around 1919 or 1920, when Jack was about 30. Sudie, a 14-year-old girl, was there and was utterly starstruck. She tried to impress him by playing a piece on the violin. He didn't even stick around to hear it. He asked Zippo to assist him go away without being seen. She listened to him. The next night, when he went on stage at the Orium Theater, she sat in the front row with her companions and stared straight ahead. There was not a single smile or laugh. She got back at him. They didn't see each other again until 1925 or 1926, when she was 20 and working at the May Company in downtown Los Angeles selling underwear. Jack came in and bought so many pairs of women's stockings that she established a store record. Every day, he came back. When he was on tour, he called her all the time, music. This wasn't a quick fling. It was strange, slow, and awkward, but it somehow worked. Artists and models gave Jack Benny his first big role in 1927. This was the best time in his Broadway career. He made $1,500 a week, which is almost $25,000 now. It was more than just money. It was proof. He was doing something that worked. He would enter on stage, set up a lovely classical piece, and then deliberately ruin it by playing the violin badly. The crowd went wild. He used extended pauses, false anger, and sarcasm that was precisely timed. The smart people in the crowd recognized how good he really was, but he'd rather have chuckles than applause. He made art out of his own failure. And music, was doing its job. That year, as Jack was making people laugh, something happened that almost ended his career. A theater manager said he wasn't paying the musicians enough. The rumors weren't about jokes or skill anymore. The talks were about money. The union for musicians got involved. There were threats of being put on a blacklist. Theater owners began to cancel his appearances. It was horrible. Jack had to make settlements and say he was sorry to keep his job. But the damage stayed. People started to say in secret that Jack Benny was cheap and that he would stiff musicians to save money. And years later, when he played the cheapskate on the radio, no one forgot. It wasn't just a show. It was based on a true scandal. Not everything that year was a tragedy, though. Jack married Sudie, now known as Mary Livingstone, on January 14, 1927, at the Clayton Hotel in Waukegan, Illinois. When it was Jack's turn to stomp the glass during the ceremony, something unexpected happened. Jack didn't pass out. Mary did it. She fell down in front of everyone. But when she woke up, there were roses. Jack had already sent her one red rose every day. She thought they would cease after the wedding. They did not. Every single day until he died in 1974, he sent her one red rose. 48 years. One rose every day. They took up a baby girl named Joan when she was 2 weeks old in 1934. Jack asked her, "How can you want to adopt something that looks so funny?" But they brought her home. At that point, Mary had already talked Jack into moving to radio. Vaudeville was dying out. It was hard to tour. Radio meant music, stability. And she was right. They became wealthy. Joan's wedding cost $25,000 when she was 19 years old. France made the design for her outfit. Holland sent the flowers. The Beverly Hills Hotel hosted the reception. Hollywood had never seen a wedding like this one before. The Canada Dry Show gave Jack his first break on the radio in 1932. It started on May 2nd, and by the end of the week, 40 million people were listening. But it didn't make sense at first. Jack was still trying to make jokes and music at the same time. He played his violin very well, thinking it would impress everyone. It didn't. The ratings weren't very good. No one cared. Then something made sense. He stopped trying to show off. He purposely made the violin sound terrible. He let people make fun of him. He was the punchline. And all of a sudden, the crowd adored it. He transferred to CBS in 1933. He was 39 years old, but instead of getting older, he just stopped counting. He was 39 from then on. He said that turning 40 wasn't funny at all. That year, he came up with the vault gag, which was a silly underground stronghold full of booby traps, security alarms, and even a guard who had been confined inside since the Civil War. It was silly. It was a smash because it was theatrical music. People thought that vault was real. The ensemble was coming together by 1936. Don Wilson came in with a loud voice. Phil Harris came in with his southern charm and stole the show with only a few lines. He called Jack Jackson and stole the show. Then Eddie Anderson from Rochester came. He was the first black man to have a regular job on national radio. He didn't only work with Jack on the show. He outsmarted him. He spoke last. Every time he spoke, he knocked down barriers. And when Southern stations tried to stop programs with Rochester from airing, Jack refused to perform without him. Jack Benny was the king of radio from 1937 to 1945. His show was constantly in the top 3. In 1944, he signed a deal paying $25,000 a week. That's more than $400,000 in today's money. He made almost $3 million a year. But the man who joked about being cheap wasn't always cheap. He gave 10% of his radio revenues to war bonds during World War II. He flew 32,000 miles with the USO and performed for more than 3 million soldiers. He didn't merely take the vault with him on tour. Music, made folks laugh when they really needed it. On January 7, 1945, the vault was officially opened. The alarm went off and the doors creaked. Ed the guard stood there waiting. People's thoughts were filled with sound as the whole affair played out. It turned into more than a joke. It was a sign. Ronald Colman was on the show in 1946. Leo DeRoser did too. The vault turned into a hangout for the wealthy and famous. Fans wrote messages requesting Jack to open the vault for charity, even though it wasn't real. They believed in it since it was part of a broader plan. It was about safety. It was about saving money. It was about getting through tough situations with a smile. By 1948, Jack had made the vault a Christmas tradition. On December 19, music, in one of the most famous holiday specials ever, he gave Don Wilson a gift, changed his mind, and handed it back. All while keeping the Real math in the vault. The bit worked because it was familiar. It made cheap music funny instead of mean. And even when Americans started spending more after the war, they still listened to Jack Benny talk about how to save money. In actual life, the IRS wasn't laughing. Jack said he spent only $19 on amusement, even though he made $375,000 a year. In one episode, he took Jimmy and Gloria Stewart out to dinner, made them pay, and then said that the cost of dry cleaning his suit when she spilled salad on him was too high. But instead of avoiding the audits, he placed them on the show. He included them in the joke. Jack Benny thought he had finally made it in 1929. MGM had cast him in the 1929 Hollywood Review, a 2-hour musical that included practically all of the studio stars. The movie made $1 million and was even nominated for Best Picture. But Benny's acting was stiff, wooden, and unpleasant. It sounded like he was forcing his violin playing. His timing didn't work. His representative campaigned for MGM to sign him to a 5-year deal. But once his second movie, Chasing Rainbows, failed, they discreetly let him go. He was back on Broadway after a few months, feeling ashamed. That first movie role didn't merely fail. It changed how people thought of him. Studios began to see him as anxious, uncertain, and difficult to cast. That one mistake in 1929 haunted him for years. In 1935, he got another chance with Broadway Melody of 1936, a big-budget movie that cost $1 million to make. Benny played a Broadway producer who was in competition with the main character. He started ad-libbing lines that made the screenplay better. But Roy Del Ruth, the director, disliked it. He wanted Benny to follow the script exactly. They fought so often that crew members remembered fights that lasted for hours. Benny considered that timing had to be natural. Del Ruth believed he was simply being a pain. The movie generated almost $2.9 million and was nominated for Best Picture, but Benny left with a bad image as someone filmmakers didn't want to work with. That label stuck almost as well as the one from his first movie. Then, in 1937, while Jack was on holiday in Cannes with Mary Livingstone, he encountered a man who said he was a Nicaraguan diplomat and called himself Albert Chapo. He said he would use his diplomatic immunity to get $31 worth of jewels for Mary through customs. Benny had faith in him. He didn't realize that the man's real name was Nathan Shapiro and that he was a scam artist who had already been to Leavenworth. The hoax fell apart when Benny got back to New York on August 30th. Chapo had the jewelry on him. Rosa Bear, his maid, told on him after he said things against the Nazis. In 1939, Jack stood in front of Judge Vincent L. Leal and was fined $10,000 and given a one-year prison term that was put on hold. The judge said, "You must be very ashamed of yourself." Benny could only stammer, "I am." George Burns was caught up in it, too. He bought a $4,085 diamond bracelet from Chapo for his wife Gracie to use to cover up burn scars on her arm from when she was a kid. Burns, music, had to pay a fine of $8,000. His total went up to $17,770 because of legal expenditures. Both men could have lost their jobs, but instead they made fun of it. On their radio appearances, they made fun of their criminal past and costly mistakes. Burns even joked about needing to go to see a probation officer. People adored it. Sponsors didn't, music, stop giving them money. In fact, they were very popular. The authorities gave Rosebear, the maid who revealed the swindle, $6.14 as a prize. Jack kept attempting to get movies to function. He was in The Horn Blows at Midnight in 1945, which was about an angel that had to destroy Earth. Warner Brothers put $1.8 million on it, but the timing was terrible. President Franklin D. Roosevelt died only 8 days before the movie came out. People all around the country were sad. No one wanted to see a comedy about the end of the world. The movie barely grossed $970,000 and lost, music, $861,000. People who didn't like it said it was too much work and meaningless. But Jack didn't run away from the calamity. For the next 20 years, he made it a recurring joke on his shows. His jokes about himself made the movie more renowned than it ever could have been if it had been a smash. Benny eventually tried something new in 1950, TV. His first CBS music show debuted on October 28, and only 4 shows were planned for the inaugural season. He still had a radio contract, and he wasn't sure how he would look on film at 56. He even joked in his first speech that he would kill himself if the program didn't work out. But it didn't go wrong. It blew up. By 1952, 20 million people were watching every week. Lucky Strike paid millions to be a sponsor. The show carried on every week by 1960, and Benny became one of the most famous people on TV. He used that platform to try out new things. In 1954, Ronald Reagan, who would later become president, was in a vault drawing. It wasn't common for visitors to be part of a running plot line back then, but Benny accomplished it. He also liked young comedians. Benny advised Johnny Carson on November 20, 1955, "Keep getting better. Soon you'll be on TV Guide." Carson never forgot that. He copied Benny's mannerisms, timing, and sense of humor. Years later, he became the longest-running late-night host in music history. Jack Benny worked all through the 1960s. His last season on NBC, from 1964 to 1965, took the vault music skits even farther, making them into Cold War satire. There were flamethrowers, alligator mows, and even guard plants named Irving in the vault. These jokes have a deeper meaning about how obsessed Americans are with safety. Carson, music, kept coming back to the set. As Benny taught them everything he knew, their relationship grew stronger. The Smothers Brothers wouldn't follow his way after the show ended on April 16, 1965, and it made for some serious friction on television. NBC realized they were showing the conclusion of something important and paid a lot of money to do it. Benny didn't go away after he retired. He made guest appearances that were written about in the Times. He had a special with Bob Hope and the Beach Boys in 1965. He utilized his vault jokes to talk about being frugal during the Vietnam War. He got paid a lot of money by CBS Music for just one night of events. He was one of the highest paid comedians in America, even in his 70s. But there was something he never talked about underneath all the jokes. He sold Lucky Strike cigarettes from 1950 to 1964. For 15 years, he sold the thing that would kill him. In October 1974, he canceled a show because he was feeling dizzy. Doctors found out in December that he had pancreatic cancer. It couldn't be fixed. He just had music weeks. He kept filming to the very end. Jack Benny died on December 26, 1974, when he was 80 years old. George Burns, Frank Sinatra, Bob Hope, and Johnny Carson were the last people to see him. And then something strange happened. When his will was made public, it showed that he had a fortune of $5,052,000, which is worth $35 million today. He had a rare 1729 Stradivarius violin that was worth $46,000. In 1985, he sold his Beverly Hills mansion, which was across the street from the Playboy Mansion, for $3 million. For decades, the man everyone thought was cheap had been discreetly giving. He began $39 trust accounts for every baby born in the city on October 5, 1961, the day his hometown renamed a junior high after him. He gave money to orchestras, youth programs, music, and charitable funds without making a big deal out of it. He had acted like he was stingy. The genuine Jack Benny gave without telling anyone. He revolutionized comedy for good. Larry David, Gary Shandling, and Jerry Seinfeld all followed his example. A show that doesn't have anything. A person who acts like himself. Running gags, a group of actors, and long, awkward pauses. Jack was the first to do it all. His presentation was a blend of real life and made-up stories. It broke the fourth wall and showed how comedy could be smart, slow, and nuanced. He had a 63-year career, and he got 3 stars on the Walk of Fame, 1 for movies, 1 for radio, and 1 for TV. Letters that came out after his death also showed something else. He has quietly backed civil rights efforts. He paid for Eddie Anderson's family in Rochester, his devoted TV sidekick. Ebony magazine named Anderson one of the 100 richest African Americans in 1962. When Anderson died in 1977, his house became the Rochester House, a place for people to stay and get better. The 3 movies they made together between 1940 and 1941 showed that black stars could draw enormous crowds in the South, even though Hollywood stated otherwise. And now, in the year 2025, something unusual has happened. The Radio Vault podcast series Lost Episodes is releasing vintage radio scripts by Jack Benny in digital form. Jokes from the war that were too risky at the time. The episode from January 7, 1945, played again. People are still hearing his vault open for the first time today. His timing is still good. The gags still work. And the more we learn, the more we see the real person behind the fiction.